Hey y'all, my name is Madi Cheever. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, certified health education specialist, type 1 diabetes specialized coach, and the face and founder of Type 1 Type Fun. And I also live with type 1 diabetes. I share stories, resources, and tips to make diabetes management easier and a lot more relatable and fun. We have a very special guest whose story is nothing short of inspiring. Robin Rybolt has been living with type 1 diabetes, and she's been through something very few people have ever experienced: an islet cell transplant. In this episode, Robin is going to take us inside that journey from her diagnosis to living with diabetes, to what it's like to go through her transplant process, and how it's changed her life since. Whether you're living with diabetes yourself, have a loved one who is, or you're just curious about groundbreaking treatment, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Hello, Robin. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I think we have to go back to the very beginning, right? So would you mind telling us a little bit about when you were first diagnosed and what that experience was like for you and your family?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually diagnosed when I was 22, but not officially diagnosed until I was 23 because I was pregnant.
Okay.
They actually found my diabetes on an HIV screen, which is kind of weird to say, but they ran my initial HIV screening and it came back positive. And then when they ran the Western blot, it came back inconclusive. And they were 100% positive that I was in seroconversion and I had HIV.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so grew up in a very rural community, and this is something they just didn't see a lot of, to be honest. So we went through a process of repeating this a few times. It kept coming back the same way. They called, I believe it was the CDC they called, and they were like, "Oh, you need to do this special test, a PCR." They did the PCR and came back on Christmas Eve. But I didn't have HIV or hepatitis C, but I do have diabetes, and I needed to come to the emergency room and get admitted.
Okay. Wow. So that must have been quite a shock. But of course, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad all is relatively well. I always say that with a mindfulness of the fact that we're still talking about diabetes, right? But I think the question that brings up for me then is, especially knowing maybe you said you came from a rural community, right? So how did living with diabetes change your life or affect your day to day school, career, family relationships?
Well, I think when you get diagnosed with type 1, it just becomes your life 100%. Like that is your life now. So it was really hard with friends and family, and they just didn't understand. My husband at the time, I mean, we were in the trenches with it together, right? Because we didn't know anything about it. CGMs were not available back then. Pumps were pretty rare. Like people had them, but they would be like, oh, that's a bad kind of diabetes if you got a pump, right? So people just didn't know about it. So often when you're talking about this, people would say, "Oh, you're a health nut because you're trying to watch your food. You're trying to watch what you eat because, I don't want my sugar going high." But to them, it's more about you're trying to be skinny or you're trying to do this or that. And I'm like, no, I just really don't want to die. Like that's
It's just a little thing I don't really prefer today. Yeah, that's that's a really important point too. I think that the identifying the fact that our perspective is so different as it relates to our health and our choices compared to someone else's perspective. And a lot of the times we can find that sometimes what people actually think is more so related to them than it is about us. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, a big reason why I'm really excited to get to chat is because of the islet cell transplant. There may be people who are not familiar with this. So, for listeners who don't know, can you explain what this is and how it works and maybe how you tie in?
Yeah, absolutely. Islet cell transplant is where they take islet cells out of a pancreas of a cadaver, somebody that's passed away. They harvest the islet cells out and they put them into your liver portal vein in a type 1 person. And then you're just not type 1 after this. So, interestingly enough, this procedure has been around for a very, very long time. And they call it TPAT, TPIAT. And it's usually done with your own islet cells where they take out your pancreas and they harvest your islet cells for people that have chronic pancreatitis. And then they put their own back in, and they don't have to take anti-rejections or anything like that because their own. So when this came around, it's kind of like wait a minute, I think we could probably put these in people and then give them immunosuppressants, and it works. And that's really what has happened with that. In order to do this, since we know this is something that's been a working thing for a very long time, you're talking over 30 years, islet cell transplant has been happening for diabetics. You have to get this through research in the US currently. If you're going to do anything with that, you have to do it with research, except for one hospital in Illinois is approved to do islet cell transplants. So if you go through research, you have to do something above and beyond that, which I did. I was part of the Cernova study where they were testing out islet cells in pouches in your stomach. They would put the pouches in your stomach, and they would put the islet cells in the pouches and see if those worked. That did not work 100%. I will say when they did it the first time, because I had two separate transplants of that. When I did it the first time, then it did fix my highs and lows. I didn't have lows anymore, like at all. And then I wouldn't have massive highs. So normally I drink a cup of coffee. I would hit 300 easily with a cup of coffee and come back down my normal pattern, maybe within 2 hours with some insulin, right? But after they did the initial islet cell in my abdomen, I would drink coffee and I might peak around, I don't know, 180, 200, maybe 250 max if you put a lot of creamer in. But then they went ahead and did a second one because they want to fill the other pouches. They were like, okay, let's do a second one. And we did that. And I ended up rejecting. So we had to go in and take them out. And that's kind of where I don't want to say the study didn't work, but I rejected the islet cells personally. And I think this had to do with the medication because at the time I was on anti-rejections that were pill form. And after that, they switched me to an IV form of medication. And then they did the islet cell transplant through the inner vein portal for the liver. And I haven't been on insulin since then. So that was October the 9th, 2024, when they did the liver portal. And I haven't been on insulin since.
Wow. And we're coming up on a year. So happy early anniversary. So I want to clarify one thing for anyone listening. I try to be very specific with language. Rejection in this context, we're not saying, I won't do this. It's actually our body literally rejecting something. So if
we're build up antibodies. That's what it's built antibodies. And that's how they find out it's going to reject it. And your body is physically rejecting the organ basically because it's an organ.
Yeah. And that's a big trade-off that we talk about with these kinds of things. People have talked about transplants of pancreas themselves, pancreas, grammar. And then we've also talked about islet cells. What's happening is there's a trade-off, right? So it's the thing that you know, the thing that you don't. So oftentimes when people consider this, what we have to talk through is, okay, well, carb ratios, carb counting, all that, it's a lot. And that's what's required of the relatively typical type 1 experience. But then if you are to consider something like this, then there might be some trade-offs. There might be, like you said, the anti-rejectal medications. There might be some additional things to watch out, trends to identify, procedures to go through, which can have its pros. I think everything, there's choices, right? And so it may not be as common simply because I think that not every medical provider is fully up to date on all of the possibilities. I think that's a big reality of why, along with the fact that it's not fully approved in most medical facilities outside of research. So what was that initial moment that led you to consider participating in this research study? Or with the two, is it 2 research studies? Am I interpreting that correct?
No, it's one research.
Just one. Okay, one research study for 2 pouches.
It's almost like you do the research to get the trade-off of the inner portal.
Okay.
Because they know the inner portal worked. So that the part of the study that I was in was if you do the research, you get the inner portal because we know the inner portal works kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what led me to this is, honestly, it's a little heartbreaking, but I'm pretty open about this, that I had got a divorce in 2015. We were married for quite some time, maybe a decade, and he was diagnosed bipolar. But in that, I remarried and I started having kidney trouble in probably 2021. And they didn't really know what caused the kidney trouble. But I told my husband at that time that, hey, I got this going on. And he was like, I don't want to be with somebody that's sick. So we got divorced. And I wasn't in a real good spot with that kind of stuff. And I was looking into more. And I went to the endocrinologist and I told the endocrinologist, like, hey, this is really upsetting. And, I don't want to deal with diabetes anymore. Nobody wants to deal with it anymore, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah, and I have 5 girls at home, and I'm like, I don't wanna deal with this anymore. It's so upsetting to deal with that kind of stuff. And he said, I think I know somebody that can help you. He's like, "You're a good candidate for a pancreas transplant." He told me, "Your A1Cs are you're very active." I was on the Tandem T-Slim. I was on, Dexcom combo. It's not that I wasn't trying or I wasn't doing everything I could. We just couldn't get it under control. My A1Cs ran in between like 7 and 7.5, which is actually pretty good in the diabetes community. But still, it's a little on the higher end, and you're still dealing with a lot of lows and a lot of highs and crankiness and things. So I ended up seeing this guy in Chicago. I called him up and told him, hey, I'm interested in this. And they said, come on up. And I came up and they were like, actually, you could join this islet cell study if you want. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I just signed up for it.
So it's kind of a casual thing that turned into something much bigger.
Yeah, I had no idea. I was just trying to get a pancreas. I was just trying to get rid of diabetes, right? Like, I didn't care. I was going to sign whatever.
Yeah, okay. So now I'm kind of curious about the details of the procedure specifically, slash, through the research, what it is that you had to do. What was some of the preparation that you might have had to consider for the islet cell transplant, and maybe what was the recovery like, if any?
Yeah, so the preparation, because it was also in research, you have to do, I think it's called thymo induction, where they kill your immune system. So first they had to put in the pouches. They put in pouches in my stomach. So it slit me basically from like the rib cage down to the pubic bone and put these pouches in there, sewed that up, let that marinate for maybe 3 months because you want blood vessels all around it to vascularize. And then they put in the islet cells on the top pouches. And then we saw how that did. We'd go back and do mixed meal tolerance testing, which is very similar to like when you're pregnant and you do the sugar glucose testing. So they would do that. And then you go back for another round to put more islets in the bottom pouches. And then, of course, I ended up rejecting. So then we took them out and then did the inner portal. So with all of that, I would say that every time I went up was probably a week at a time. I had trying to think, it was probably 5 surgeries, I think, total that they did. But then you did thymo induction too. So probably about 6 weeks of stay for me in the hospital. And with the thymo induction, I actually had a reaction to that after I went home and had to go back for a week because I ended up with serum sickness. But that everyone doesn't get that. That's just kind of something that happens.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable with all of the information you're sharing. A question has come to mind, if you're comfortable. What was the hardest part of this experience? Was it physical? Was it emotional? Was it both?
I would probably say emotional because the more so tied into that second divorce was somebody that was like, I just don't want to be with you because you're sick. That was a huge struggle because I have 2 small kids with him and it continues on. And every time I would go up and I'm like, well, I have to go because I have an organ. It was kind of like, I don't really think you need to go. And, it was just like a whole emotional battle. And then you're down and you're missing your kids' things. So I would say that was a really hard part. My daughter ended up losing her spot on the cheer team at her high school because I wasn't present enough, to be honest. And then just your kids seeing you down and having surgeries and constantly being out and being like, well, mommy's sick. And transplant meds are no joke. I'm not going to say that it was a cakewalk. It wasn't bad. I would still do it 1,000 times over because the end result was so much better. But transplant meds they can be rough. They can be rough. They can make you very sick.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the client populations I work with is individuals who have had transplants, and then they also need that blood sugar support. Oftentimes, like kidneys or something like that. It's a lot. There's so much to consider. It is so complex, and I think everyone who goes through even somewhat of a similar experience deserves all of the credit for everything that you're dealing with. I'm sorry that the emotional side of things was so tough. That sounds so hard. And I wish that you had just gotten all of the amazing. I'm sure there were some days where you really did have that awesome support, but I bet there were some days too where you're like, man, I really need some extra TLC. And I'm hoping that you are feeling that now. And I hope that everyone is able to have such wonderful, supportive people surrounding them. And something that you said actually got me curious. So you were talking about you would do this over, right? Even though you know the struggle of it, you would do it over because of maybe the benefit that you've seen. So the thought that I had is, how does that blood sugar management change immediately after transplant? And then what?
Yeah, so I did have support through, like, I have a fiance, and he's excellent. He was up there 100% with me and helped support, but it's not the same as kind of, struggling with your children and emotions, right? So, what did change immediately is the day after transplant, I had to go get an ultrasound. I think they ultrasound your liver to make sure there's not blood clots in it and stuff like that, just from doing the basic surgery and things. But I had a coffee after, and I didn't have a spike. And I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." Like, okay. But at the same time, you sit there and you think, when is the other shoe going to drop on this situation? So I'm still very cautious about the things I eat. I've I've formed like a big community, especially like just bringing people in I've talked to. It's already had the same transplant that have had pancreas and things, and everyone is the same way. We're all still checking our blood sugar. We're all still very worried about it, even though it's completely normal. I actually just took my Dexcom off 3 days ago. Like I don't have one on today, and they had to take my pump off me, as in they had to tell me that needs to come off. Your A1C is 4.4 and the pump has to come off. And I was like, okay, because I was so scared. I'm terrified that it's going to come back. But now you not only can you eat whatever you want, and I know that a lot of people outside the diabetic community is probably like, oh, great, you can go eat Skittles, you can eat what you want. This is not your main concern in life. If you're a type 1 diabetic, nobody is out here saying, I'm sad I can't eat Skittles. They're saying, I'm sad I didn't get 8 hours of sleep because my pump was beeping. They're sad I can't go swimming with my children because my blood sugar will drop till 20, while I'm swimming, and I won't know because I'm too far away from my Dexcom. Like, these are the things that people are really concerned about in the type 1 community. It's not about us not eating mashed potatoes or Skittles or a candy bar. Like, we don't even care about that. We want to be able to do the other things in life, like going hiking and stuff. I traveled for the first time in December with no pump. I mean, I brought the pump with me. I shouldn't say I traveled that. I brought it with me in a bag because I was like, maybe I might need this, because I was unsure about it last year. That's just a month out of transplant. But went through TSA and I didn't get flagged. I didn't have to do a pat down. I went straight through and got on my plane with no problems, because usually you get patted down in TSA.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then we went into Great Wolf Lodge, and I swam with the kids in December. And just last month, I went and swam in the ocean for 2 hours with no pump, nothing on. Like, I was just swimming. My blood sugar was stable. It was 83. And
Man.
those are the things that are life altering for a type 1 diabetic. Getting regular sleep. We know that in the general public, not getting regular sleep affects your health, right?
Yeah.
But as a type 1 diabetic, you might as well have a newborn right beside you 100% of the time, because of these beeps, the lows, and snacks, and worrying about things. And that's the biggest life altering thing for me, and why I would do it 1,000 times. I got 5 kids, and those girls are nothing compared to diabetes. I would take a newborn baby any day over type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, a lot of people have their trade-offs, right? There was a trend going on around recently that was like, oh, if you had the opportunity to be cured of diabetes, would you? And a lot of the influencers in the T1D world were like, no, I love my diabetes. It's who I am. I don't know. Maybe I'm not a good person, but I was just like, yep, nope, I'm done. Like, absolutely, I have served my time. Thank you. I'm ready for the next challenge. It is a really big thing. I don't know if you've heard the Stanford medicine statistic that says individuals with type 1 compared to their counterparts without need to make about an extra 180 something decisions in a day. I did the math on that and I perfectly spaced it throughout the day, which I know isn't how diabetes works, but that is one choice every 5 minutes if you get 8 hours of sleep. One choice every 5 minutes. So think
Yeah.
about hearing mom every 5 minutes or more or less. I don't know, but there's a lot of things that there's, yeah, it's quite a world of opportunity and possibility. And the level of security and safety you mentioned emotionally, having that is so freeing. If you're listening to this and you're like, 2 hours of swimming, that's whatever. That's just a normal day. That is a wonderful amount of health privilege. I want you to keep your health and keep running with it. That's awesome. Because when I was sitting here, I was like, oh my gosh, 2 hours in the ocean. I would be stressed to the max because I would have no clue. Like me taking a surfing lesson last year was so scary. I stayed about 200 the whole time because I was scared of going low, but didn't go much higher, so that was fine. But I didn't have my CGM. I didn't have anything, right? It was just, I say it's like having type 1 diabetes for me with having a CGM and an insulin pump. It's like driving a car. You have a backup camera. You can see out the windows. You have a backup, a mirror, all that. And then imagine removing all of that. And then it's like you're literally driving a box that you can't see out of. Good luck. Like that's how diabetes feels to me sometimes, type 1 as I manage it. But something else that you mentioned too is the you had to take away the pump, right? You had to take away the pump. I know that feeling of that security from the pump. It like my pump is one of my besties. No offense to my significant other, no offense to my actual besties, but Patrick and I have a T-Slim. So Patrick and I are close. We're this. And I think though the thought that came up is so you've gotten to get rid of or you've had to get rid of the pump. Are there any ongoing medications or monitoring that you have to do to maintain what has happened in this transplant?
Yeah, actually, I do an IV. So I do low dose tacrolimus in a pill form because a lot of transplant patients they take tacrolimus, but it's very well known that tacrolimus does not help your kidneys.
Okay.
Tacrolimus is very hard on the kidneys. So I also take belatacept in an IV form, and that's more of I don't want to say it's experimental, but it's not necessarily it's used more in kidney transplants, but he's kind of seeing how this works. Now, when I told you I rejected, I was on my Fortic and tacrolimus. And that's when he switched all his patients over to tacrolimus and belatacept IVs to see if that would help. And he did tell me a couple weeks ago, a couple patients went off of Bella because it's just expensive. It's very expensive to be on that. They ended up rejecting. So it's staying on Bella is kind of where you want to be at for right now, because that's just what the study and the research is showing is staying on that. So I do take those. I take my Tacro twice a day just because you can do a one dose Tacro, but I think it's more expensive and insurances don't really like it. But you also get different side effects. Everybody's different. But my twice a day Tacro is kind of like, this is okay for me. That's where I sit at, is the twice a day. And then I do the Bella every 4 weeks. I go to Chicago and do that, but we're going to transfer that to my hometown soon. But that's all I take for ongoing medications for transplant. I do take a thyroid pill, but that came along with the diabetes. It's like a diabetes friendly friend over here hanging out, the thyroid problems.
Yep, frenemies, yes. And just to clarify, if anyone's listening, we are not giving medical advice. We are simply talking about our experiences here. And thank you for sharing those experiences and that information. It's so cool, I think, for people to understand what is going on in the world of medicine in general, and then niching down into diabetes is very cool. Is there anything that you wish you would have known before going through all of this?
I don't think there's anything ahead of time that I would have known or wanted to know, because at the point that I was in life, I wanted rid of it. I was
Yeah.
okay with doing something even slightly risky to get rid of it. I'm not a risky person, but I would have done risky things to get rid of it.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. It takes a lot. It takes a big toll. It takes energy, it takes emotion, it takes time, it takes a lot of brain power, a lot of manpower, a lot of money to do all of this. And it's tough, but so are we. And so the fact that you have gotten to choose this journey to be on, that you have found the right people, found the right support is awesome. And it makes me kind of think, what would, if someone was kind of sitting in your shoes, maybe I guess I'd say like a year ago or prior, would you give them any advice based on what you know now?
I think the advice that I would probably think about is this doctor that I went to. He runs a lot of these research-based programs, and he's continuing on with his research. Like, I'm just a little peg in his cog, right? So he's continuing on with his research, but he's fantastic, fantastic doctor. I would highly recommend anyone interested in diabetes research to reach out to him. And he's through University of Chicago. His name's Dr. Wachowski, but their team is one of the most excellent teams I've ever met in my life. This doctor gives his phone number to his patients. You can text him at any time. I've texted this guy at 2 o'clock in the morning and I've been like, hey, I've got a slight fever, 99.9. And he calls me directly back. And I'm like, whoa, I don't think it was that deep. But he's like, yeah, it is. This is what we're going to do. They just have a fantastic team. So anyone that's considering any research or doing something like that, I think you should interview the team and make sure this is a good fit for you. Make sure that you are able to get the support you need out of that, because I wouldn't have been okay without having support.
Oh my goodness. Yes, a thousand times over. Make sure that you are being intentional with your questions and your care team. And if it's not the right fit, I don't know how everyone feels about trusting their gut. Some people are better at it, some people aren't as great at it. But if you can, if you get that gut feeling or that voice in the back of your head and it's like, I don't know about this, then maybe it's something to listen to, I guess. And, ask questions, ask those questions out loud, be bold, be unapologetic, be almost ruthless in asking for what it is that you need, whether it's an understanding of what's going on or direct questions about the care, the aftercare, all of that stuff, I think it just makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I was really bold in asking him questions and he did not shy away from them. And mine was more so a situation of I wanted to make sure that his passion was in this, because it's like I don't want to go to a doctor that's just like, well, I just want to see if this will work type thing. And it's really funny. I straight honestly asked him, why diabetes? Why are you in? And my thought was, do you have a child? Do you have a family member? Something that's affected you with diabetes? And he said, I'm just a transplant doctor. I like transplanting things. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting why people go into things and why they do what they do. And just to have such an awesome supporter that sounds like a wonderful provider. I'm glad that you had that support on your side. It makes all of the difference. And so I think my final question for you today is there anything we haven't talked about or haven't discussed that you feel like it deserves a moment in the spotlight? Anything you want to say or anything you want people to know?
I think more so just about research, that more people should apply to research, because this has worked out okay for me so far. I mean, I'm a year in. And I think that following the research, I think there's a lot of stuff that's out right now. There's a lot of these different things that are just coming out. And have you seen the Santa one, where they are doing gene editing?
I think, yes. I was just talking about this with one of my clients. I don't know enough to speak on it yet, but I have heard this chat. Do you want to say more at it?
No, no, no. I don't know enough to speak on it.
Okay. Yeah, it's all complex. I'm not a researcher.
Yeah. I just know there's a ton of research out there. And I think that a lot of people they shy away from it because of the anti-rejections, but they're researching anti-rejections a lot right now. And I know that there's one Rupart that's in the mix right now, and it doesn't affect the kidneys. They're doing a lot with these anti-rejections to be less harmful. So I think those are things that do deserve the spotlight and that people should look forward to.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And again, thank you for an awesome chat today. My hope is that for those listening, I hope this brought an extra layer of depth and understanding of simply what is possible. I truly believe that medication and technology are improving so exponentially that we're going to see a lot of change in the next 10 years for the best, right? The next 10 years are going to be so much more progressive than the last 10 years. I think that's just how it works in general. And so, again, Robin, thank you for sharing your experience today.
Thank you.
That's it for today, my friends, but the fun doesn't stop here. If you liked this episode and want more real talk diabetes support, come hang out with me on social. Just search Type 1 Type Fun, all words, or head to type1typefun.com for tools, tips, freebies, and real-life resources you can actually use. And if this episode made you laugh, learn, or feel a little more seen, feel free to leave a comment, give it a like, share it with someone you love. But until next time, live empowered, be silly, have fun, and eat some carbs.
The information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.